Hello YouTube, and welcome to another Elder Scrolls lore video. Unfortunately, my planned lore video for today had to be postponed since I need several more hours to finish it, so I decided to publish this video that I was working on about a year ago, where I tried to answer the question, are the Mede Emperors illegitimate or are they legitimate? I've always found this a very fascinating subject to think about, and I'm very excited to finally post a video on it. And this is also very good because I've had complaints that I don't no longer do enough political videos about the Elder Scrolls lore. So yeah, for those people, let's just kick off with the video. So, to determine whether the Mede Emperors are legitimate, we first need to agree on a definition for legitimacy. In general political analysis nowadays, legitimacy means that your rule and your authority are seen as just by your subjects. For example, if someone would initiate a coup here in the Netherlands and become a dictator, we would not view that as a legitimate ruler, as he did not use a legal rational way to get to power. He wasn't democratically chosen by us, which means that he didn't use the system that we have in place to become a leader and rather just forced himself in. The problem that we face when applying this to Tamriel is that Tamriel has never known any structured democracy in any form. There have never been elections or any sort of true democratic process by which a leader is elected. Yes, some emperors get elected by the Elder Council in times without an emperor in the Empire, but the members of the Elder Council are not elected. They are there because of their power and influence, which gives them a seat at the table of the Empire's rule. They're not there because their subjects elected them to represent them. They just forced themselves in there. So, since Tamriel does not know democratic legitimacy, how are leaders in Tamriel legitimized to the public? In our own universe, kings and emperors tended to legitimize themselves in the Middle Ages by saying that their power came from God. They told people that if God recognized them as their leader, the people should too recognize that king or emperor as their leader. And in later time, after the Enlightenment, kings and emperors tended to legitimize themselves not by just saying that they had divine right, but they also tended to rule for the people, so making laws and policies beneficial to the people and protecting the people so that they felt they had legitimacy. This was essentially the concept of enlightened absolute monarchy. I just want to say that this isn't filler, you actually need to remember this thing about enlightened absolute monarchy, since it's pretty important further on in the video. So, how are leaders in the Elder Scrolls universe legitimized? Well, by a similar concept to our own universe during the medieval age, by saying that they were chosen by the gods, specifically Akatosh, because ever since Saint Alessia got blessed with the dragon blood, it's been the dragonborn emperors who were seen as legitimate emperors, because they could keep oblivion at bay by lighting the dragon fires with the Amulet of Kings. So this made it so that on Tamriel the definition of a legitimate emperor was a dragonborn emperor who could light the dragon fires. An example of that standard is Varan Aquilarius, an emperor during the Interregnum in the Second Era, who felt so insecure about their legitimacy that he wanted to do whatever possible to become dragonborn so that there would be no question about his legitimacy. So this whole power legitimized by the gods definition was a big factor in Tamriel ever since the First Era until the Third Era. Now, two obvious cases that challenge this are of course the Akaviri potentates and the many emperors during the Interregnum, who were all described as pretenders. Now, the case with the Akaviri potentates was that they legitimized their power by telling the people that they were quote-unquote waiting for a dragonborn to appear. And while there was no dragonborn, he just said that he was the most fit person to rule due to his experience in rule and working with the dragonborn emperors of the Riemann dynasty, etc, etc. The Akaviri did not become emperor, they became potentates, so in essence they recognized the legitimacy of dragonborns and they used their own argumentation of being the best to rule while there was no dragonborn present to sort of circumvent that system and then gain legitimacy for their own rule. And what about the pretender emperors, as they are called during the Interregnum? Why are they called pretenders? Well, let's take the most prominent example that we have that the most people have heard of. The Longhouse Emperor dynasty that ruled during the Interregnum. Those were three emperors that ruled for about 70 years. They came to power by force and took the title of emperor for themselves. Now, to many people this would have been seen as illegitimate. However, these emperors might have gained legitimacy with their actions if they ruled for the people, as the people would accept their rule and might start to see it as just. which is the definition of legitimacy as we talked about earlier. However, while their rule might have been seen as legitimate, in the same way that a local leader who does good things for his people is seen as legitimate, these emperors taking the exact title of emperor is what made them pretenders. Not their rule, which might have been good and accepted, but they are called pretenders because they took the title of emperor, a title only reserved for dragonborns during that day and age. The title of emperor used to be very closely associated with being dragonborn, almost to a synonym way, meaning that while they as rulers might have been legitimate, their title of emperor, the title that they took, was illegitimate. So maybe if they had called themselves potentates as well, that were just waiting for the next dragonborn or conquerors or something, they would have actually been legitimate rulers to the people of Tamriel, as the word emperor just had a certain definition for them, and that made them pretenders in the end. But what about present day? The Mead Emperors are no Dragonborns, however being Dragonborn is no longer a requirement these days to be Emperor, since the dragon fires no longer need to be lit in order to keep Tamriel safe from oblivion these days. So what would in present day Tamriel be the base of authority and legitimacy? Well, that would be whether the people accept the rule and view it as just, or don't view it as just, which makes it illegitimate. And since there's no electoral system in place to justify someone's rule, the legitimacy cannot be derived from being an elected leader. Rather, the legitimacy of any leader in modern-day Tamriel is derived from the people whom they govern, and whether these people see their rule as just, which they will only find just if the leader rules in favor of the people. This might be a bit confusing, so let me give you a tidbit of context. If a modern-day president makes a very unpopular law, the people will not like it, but the legitimacy of his position is derived from the fact that he's an elected leader. So he will just not be pushed out of power immediately, and an unpopular measure won't reduce his legitimacy, since the people of a country accept the democratic system which got him elected. In Tamriel, there's no such system, no structured way to get to power. Power is taken by influential people and by military leaders, meaning that they derive their legitimacy from their actions and not from the system which got them there, since they usually got there in a very illegitimate position, or at least the first person in a dynasty, since within a monarchy, a just and legitimate way to get to power is by just succeeding your father or whoever made you the heir. However, retaining that legitimacy would be by doing just actions and having your rule viewed as just. So the only way for a leader in post-Oblivion Crisis Tamriel to be viewed as legitimate would be because of their actions, which would be favorable to the people, which gives them the acceptance of the people and of their leadership and gives them thus legitimacy. So finally, let's answer the question whether the Mead Emperors themselves are legitimate. They came to power with Titus Mead I, who reconquered Tamriel and ushered in a sort of age of rebuilding and relative peace for the humans' provinces, which he reunited, or so you could say, at least for those provinces. His rule was legitimate, and for his son, Atrebus, who would be the next emperor, he just succeeded his father, which in a monarchy, as I said before, is viewed as a legitimate way to come to power, and considering that the Mead dynasty wasn't ousted, we can assume that he and the people after him, the emperors after him, ruled in a legitimate way and retained their legitimacy through their actions. Basically that concept of enlightened monarchy that we talked about earlier. The turning point in this would be the Great War. The Emperor would sign the White Gold Concordat, which is a hugely unpopular measure, especially in Skyrim. People in Skyrim got so angry that they rebelled over it, as we obviously know. So that concludes that at least for the people that rebelled, Titus Mead II no longer has legitimate rule over them. And if the Empire conquers back that part of Skyrim but people are still dissatisfied, even if they are forced to follow Imperial law, that rule would still not be legitimate because it isn't accepted by the people. The Empire would have authority in those parts of Skyrim that are so dissatisfied that they want to leave, but they would not have legitimate authority. However, this just means that the Emperor no longer has the legitimacy of rule over the people that are so dissatisfied that they no longer want him as a leader. To the other people, for example in Cyrodiil, he might still be a legitimate monarch, as to them he rose to power in a legitimate way. He succeeded his father or uncle or whoever he succeeded or made him an heir. And since he handles according to their liking, it gives him regional legitimacy in at least Cyrodiil and maybe also High Rock and the west of Skyrim. But for the people that are so dissatisfied with his policies that they reject him as a leader and even rebel, in those regions he lost his legitimate authority, if that makes sense. So in conclusion, are the Mead Emperors illegitimate? well, that's up to the people that they rule. However, the point that I tried to make in this video is that in post-Oblivion Tamriel, not being a Dragonborn is no longer a disqualifier for having legitimate rule. Your legitimate rule is derived from the fact that you rule your people in a just way and your people accept your rule. Now, don't confuse that with authority, again, because you have authority over someone if you can have them if they do whatever you say. And you can derive that from the fact that you have a military machine behind you and such. However, legitimacy means that these people that you rule also find you a just leader. And to have that in Tamriel, to be a just emperor, you no longer have to be Dragonborn. Now, again, whether the Meet the Emperors are legitimate or not, that's purely up to the people that they rule. So if you decide, no, I don't like the policies that he's making, and no, he shouldn't be emperor, then he's at least not legitimate to you. But that doesn't mean that he is, in essence, an illegitimate emperor. But then again, we all have to kind of decide this for ourselves, I guess. That said, I hope that you liked this video. It was quite a heavy material video, if that makes sense. I had this script proofread by a couple of people and they found it pretty confusing, so I'm sorry if I repeated myself sometimes in this video, but I tried to make it as understandable as possible for everyone, even if you're not really too versed in politics, and I hope that I succeeded at that. That said, let me know if you agree or disagree with this, because there's a whole plethora of things that we can disagree on in this video. For example, our definition of legitimacy. I use one that's mostly accepted around the internet, but then again, you go to town in the comments. Alright, if you like this video, consider giving a like, and if you like Elder Scrolls lore content, consider sticking around for more or checking out some of my backlog videos. I have a lot of Elder Scrolls lore content by now, so consider checking it out. And yeah, if you want to support me in a more personal way, there is of course my Patreon. Then you can join the very beautiful people here on screen. And allow me to give a vocal mention to my top patrons, the awesome people Gabriel Binda, Hayden Barnes and Sam Campling. You guys are awesome. That said, I will see you all in the next video. Bye bye.